Hello and welcome to this watercolor tutorial for Mermaid. It's May and we're doing a mermaid watercolor tutorial. And we're going to move pretty quickly. This is about a 15-minute long video with some time lapse and some slowed down footage. So we'll go ahead and get started. I do have my mermaid sketched onto the paper, onto some watercolor paper and taped down to the paper. And we'll go ahead and start with the layers, painting her. I do have all of the supplies listed in the description and in the Patreon post. We are using White Nights watercolor, and she is sketched with a Colorase colored pencil by Prismacolor, and we're just laying in the layers. The paper has been given a wash of color just to set kind of a foundational color ground in there before I did the sketch. That is, it's a little bit of pink and a little bit of blue down at the bottom, and that's just with a large brush, just making a big watercolor wash, and the tape holds that down, and when we peel off the tape there'll be a nice clean white border there. And we're just, filling in, getting those first layers of the watercolor down. I've got some neutrals in there, kind of going in where the shadows are going to be. And then we'll start working on her skin. The White Nights watercolors that I'm using, they have some really good colors that are great for skin. They've got like a rust colored orange that I like to use, and you can mix that with a little bit of the cool red and a lot of water that gets kind of a pink, and that really works great for skin tones. And then because you have that drawing down with an orange or a pink or a red, very, very light colored pencil, then you don't have to worry about the graphite smearing or making a muddy drawing under that painting. And then you can bring in darker whenever you're doing eyes. Usually I like to kind of put those in early just because that's a thing that I do, but you can do those toward the end if you don't want to muddy up your painting. Now with this one I've got the hair in, and the hair I've got some green in it because that's a stylistic choice. I like the little bits of green in her hair along with the kind of the mossy rocks that she's on. Now there's a skip here where you've seen the background done. I accidentally did some slow motion that made a 45-minute long time painting that mountain, and that was not good. So I actually had to leave that out, and I apologize, but that was just putting in a cool green on that background. So with a general watercolor set, you get a cool green and a warm green, and that helps making your landscapes and your natural parts of your paintings. With the water, I'm filling in with a turquoise blue and a nice dark blue over those grays, and as we get to the end you'll see how I finish that out. And then of course with the green, those shadows, I'm kind of working light to dark, which is a little bit the opposite of oil painting, because the light areas are on your paper already, unless you're using masking fluid where you kind of cover up an area and then peel it off, which I don't really do that often. So everything that's light, you leave it or you paint a light color there, and then you fill in your dark areas. And then working with the flower here, she's got some very bright hibiscus and berries and stuff in her hair. And I apologize for any background noise you might hear. My dog's walking up to me, and we've got some people working on trees on our block. We've got from the storms that have happened, which if you're seeing this and you're in Oklahoma, then you know what's going on here. Her tail has a lot of orange and kind of goldeny yellows in it. And I gave the sky a very pink, purple, kind of a dusky, sunsetty colors that complement with the green. And then we're just layering in all of those colors. It goes really fast on this footage, but it actually takes a while to let those dry and then come back and come in on top of them. And there are a couple of watercolor techniques that you can do where you fill in where it's like wet on wet, or then you paint right on top of the dry paper. And I'll make another video where we go over those very slowly. So here is painting the hair, and this layer is dry in this part of the recording. And I'm going in with a little tiny brush and then painting very thin strokes to do the hair. And that's how you get all the little strands. And with my colors that are mixed, what I'll do is I'll take a darker color and just add it to make it slightly darker, and then do a strand next to it, and then make it a little darker, do a strand next to it, and a few strands next to it, and so on. And then go back to the lighter colors, and then just kind of do a progression. But the very, very lightest part of her hair, where the light's hitting it, then I won't really mess with that until I'm going to put on like the gouache or the white ink. And then those flowers will get the very, very bright reds when we go back to the reds. And then a few little extra strands, because I did have some extra strands drawn in my sketch. And then the tail, working lightest to dark, we'll put the yellow on first, because the lightest part of her tail will be yellow. And then the darkest parts will be that rich, rich orange. And that's what will be at the edges, push to the edges, and then blend in with that yellow. And being that they're watercolors, you can add a little bit of water to blend that all together if you put on a very, very, very dark bit of a pigment. And then if you have that and it's a little light still, then you can add a little bit more and darken it up. One thing to be sure of is that you don't add too much water, or it will spread. It will cause your colors to bloom, which can be a really nice effect. It can be an intentional effect, but if you're doing like a controlled painting with specific composition, then you may not want to do that. And if that does happen, you can just take a paper towel or a dry brush and touch it to that water and pull it back up. And now we're just enriching the yellow a little bit. This yellow is a little bit more saturated. So it will be really, really bright. And adding that extra water, blend it in, spread it around. And a little bit more on the tail. One of the advantages with watercolors is they can still be used very thick to get your outlines. They can be added to the negative space in those colors to push your background spaces back and bring your forms forward. And you can keep them about the thickness of ink if you still want to use them for calligraphy, for writing, for those things. Just making sure the line work on the tail is a little bit sharper. And see, now you can see that it's several layers in. The tail is a little bit more orange and yellow. And more background dog sounds again. Go away, Sasha, please. Thank you. And we are back to some sped up footage. These are details of putting scales on and touching up skin tones. This is a mixed media piece, so she's actually not almost done here. There is a lot left to add, including ink and gouache, but we are still adding more watercolor at this point. So now we're adding ink with a Pentel brush pen, ink to the flowers, finishing out her eyelashes, and a few key outline portions. And then also with the micron pen, this is the stuff that I wanted to be sure was a very, very fine line. So I didn't want to chance it with my other pen. And again, the use of ink here is a stylistic choice. You can do the whole thing in watercolor if you want, but I do like the way the ink looks on this for the illustrative reasons. And I'm not using a solid line around the whole thing like traditional tattoo flash or that style. This is lines where I choose them, lines that are for some of the hair, lines in some of the water, and I'm doing a broken line around the little islands and mossy land masses because there is light breaking around them. So they sort of they sort of inform texture more than defining forms. Now we're using the gouache. This is Holbein Acryla white gouache that I'm using just to add more highlights where, watercolor can't do that. Making the water just have that little extra sparkle when light shines on it. And also, she's got some little gold shimmer and some jewelry and necklaces. Otherwise, if she's a golden mermaid, she's got to have her bling. I'm giving her that, and she is done. Thank you for checking us out, and thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me this mermaid. Thank you, patrons.